Why building weapons that are inherently ineffective? Because they are cool, of course. And today, I'm gonna show you how to make them more effective than you have made them so far.
From the depth, instant tutorial.
Welcome to Instant Tutorials with your host Eric for the Gmodism channel. One advantage of high-arc CRAM mortars is that we don't have to build them on a sub-object. We can just build them as a prefab just on a vehicle and just use them from there. And thus, we can make them a little bit more resilient if we set them up in the correct way. We're going to make a pretty big little CRAM mortar, so we are going to use a 15x15 grid to set up our CRAM mortar. But first off, we have to do some basic CRAM Tetris. So to make CRAM Tetris, we're going to use a 3D Tetris, so I'm going to show you how to basically do that right now. So what we're going to do for our Tetris template, we are going to use just hardener pellets because they are a little bit cheap, and we place 5 like this. Then we go down and select the packer, and make sure we align the packer like an arrow like this, so we have all 3 connections connected up. Just like that. Then we go ahead and take a 6-way connector and place it down here. They connect in all directions like this. And now we basically have a diamond shape. You can go ahead and save this as a prefab. To set up a layer of pellets, basically, we just align the green connectors like this, and we can basically expand our diamond pattern. If you're a commissioned officer in the army of Gmodism, you have access to this shape in the files, hopefully when you're watching this video or in the next update of them. To set up the connection layer, we will want to make sure we have all ways connected. All 6 directions should be connected. So if we spawn another diamond on top of this, we can basically see a little bit better how to connect everything up. So for example, if we would like to connect up and down, we will place one here, 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 and of course one in the middle as well. So now we need to take our 6-way connectors to connect them up, and they need to be connected up to these columns. So this connects here, this connects there, this connects here, this connects there, and this connects there. And this is a pretty basic shape. However, now we only have packers in this, and of course the pellets are on the other layer. This is a tiny little bit inefficient, so we can go and do a little effectivization here. If we're just gonna do a little rundown on how CRAM works in general, this is the really fast method of explaining it. The firing piece fires CRAM shells. CRAM shells are buckets. Buckets are being filled by pellets. They deal damage in different types: explosive, fragmentation, EMP, incendiary, or just hardener for kinetic penetration. You can do hollow point with that, or just to make the shell have a higher health. The amount of pellets doesn't really matter, only the amount to the packer matter. So you want to maximize the connections to packers, so basically each pellet has 6 connections. So one pellet, which has connections on 6 sides, is as good as 6 pellets having connection on one side. And the pellets are pretty expensive, so you want to keep them low. And that's why we're doing 3D Tetris with 6-way connections per pellet. That's for efficiency. Packers pack the pellets into the bucket, which is the CRAM shell. And basically, the more packers you have, or packer connections you have to pellets, the faster you will fill that bucket. If you would like to cram more stuff in your bucket, you can make it wider by having gauge increaser and bring up the gauge from 1000 to 2000 millimeters. And if you want to pack stuff, pellets, into your buckets more compactly, you need payload compactors. And using that will also increase the reload time, of course, because that will let you have more pellets in each bucket. If you want a more detailed explanation, I refer you to my other tutorials. In any case, this layer only needs connection to one side. Now it has connection to multiple sides. So this is redundant. this is redundant, and this is redundant. And you can see this thing basically connects to nothing, so we can twist that in this direction to connect up. Now you can see these guys are now connected to nothing, and this is a problem. So we'll need to fix this by adding back this block. And we need to turn this one and twist it in this direction, so we have basically an ability to have something here and something here. Now this thing we actually can twist around and put in connection like this, so we can actually use this third connection here. And while we don't have very many connections here, payload compactors are pretty cheap, so we can basically throw in a payload compactor here and a payload compactor there. Now we have a connection layer with some payload compactors in it. So you can go ahead and save this in your prefabs for later use. Let's move over to our building area here. So just to make it a little bit more simple, we are going to elevate this into the air a little bit. As said, we're going to do a 15 times 15 shape box where we build our CRAM. Now we should go to CRAM cannons and add some 6-way connectors. We are going to make a simple little connection platform in the bottom here. And in the middle of this, we should be placing a firing piece. When we're building CRAM mortars, it's actually better to have the firing piece in the bottom. Now, one thing that's pretty interesting is that when you spawn a firing piece, they have a downside and a upside. The downside usually faces down. When you're building a mortar, the downside should be facing towards the enemy. So keep the direction when you're building this, so you know this is basically forwards. And here we can see this is the down, and we basically just pitch it up like this, and we can put it down here. And to really make sure we know the directions, we can paint this side red, so we know that is the cannon's back, and this side is the cannon's front side. Alright, so now we should fill in this CRAM cannon, so we should take our little connection shape, and you just spawn one of them here, and one above, the diamond shape with the pellets, and you put it in between here. So we are trying to fill it out as much as possible, so we can basically delete this area, paste this in, and as you can see, this can be connected up like this, paste it in. And you basically want to fill up the area as much as you can, aligning them up with the connection layer so they overlap like this. And you want to make sure that you use all of the space that you have to your disposal. And if it bleeds over, that is fine. We are going to cut that off later. We can actually go ahead and cut this out so we don't accidentally or like cut off our firing piece. Just like that. So we are continuing to fill in the space with our diamonds and then fit them in between like this. And like that. Now we basically need to cut off the overflow. So as you know, we have our little area like this that we should build on. And we just cut off everything that is overflowing like this. Very nice. Down here we do have our firing piece, and this down layer will be a little bit different than the other layers. It will be a little bit less efficient. So we're just going to take from our firing piece and we're going to remove some blocks in order to connect up everything to each other. So basically, you can see there, that has to go, that has to go. And we can just see piece by piece more areas being connected up like this. And we want to make sure that each and every of these green little pillars are being connected up to the firing piece bit by bit by creating a network into it here. And when you think you have connected everything up on the bottom layer, you basically just go through it, each and every block here on the bottom layer, like a printer, and see that it is indeed connected up. Now we need to go to the next portion where we have these side columns. These blocks on the side columns have to be connected up. So these you can see are not connected up. Why? We need to connect them up this and like this, and we're just going to go around and do this on each of the sides. Then we also have the issue of the connected packers, so this compactor is useless. Exchange those for gauge increasers. So you can see gauge increaser for that one. This one has 0 packers connected. Change that to a gauge increaser. You can also do like this. Take this one, for example, and you just twist it around so that it connects to the side. So you just go through the pattern here and check the different payload compactors and see which of them has 0 connections. So then we just exchange them here too with a gauge increaser, which will make us certain we'll have max gauge. Even if we are damaged and stuff like that, we have some redundancy. The gauge increasers are pretty cheap, so there is not a big deal of having one too many of them. That's absolutely fine. Right, and then we made sure the columns are connected up as well, so we don't have any blocks up here. So each the layers are connected as well. So then we should also go through the top layer here and check which payload compactors may not have connections available to them. If there is at least one connection, that is fine. If there are 0 connections, we can replace it with one of this, gauge increaser. It may be a little bit boring going through this like a printer like this, but if we do it properly now, we don't need to do it later. So it will save a lot of time if we do it properly the first time like this, and then we can just copy paste it. Right, so now we have a perfectly well set up layer. We of course need to make sure we have the firing piece here. So for the firing piece, we need to make a hole for the barrel. So it can be a good idea to see that any of our connections didn't break when we remove the block for where the firing piece barrel will go. And it seems to be a-okay. Now we have another effectivization thing we can do. We can also switch the pellets to the side here with compactors. But I honestly want to see how the reload time is going to be first before I'll do that. So we just take 2 high, 15 times 15 times 2, and we just copy and paste it like this. And you should of course make it as high as you want this gun. The cool thing with CRAM Mortar is that you can make a pretty compact system like this. It doesn't need to be very tall. I think 15 times 15, and it happens to be 9 blocks tall right now, and I think that is gonna be enough, since this is a 1-barrel system. If we check this, we can look at and see what reload time we have. We have 18 seconds, and we can make that a little bit slower, which means that looking at the hardener pellets here, we can exchange some of them with payload compactors, especially the one with few connections, because that will improve the efficiency of our gun. And we can just add them away until we have a reload time that feels a little bit more reasonable. Maybe 25 seconds or something like that. There we have it. 23 seconds for a 2000mm cannon is pretty reasonable. The reason why we have the firing piece deep within it is that we should be able to protect the firing piece, the local weapon controller as well, and also so that the barrel doesn't have to stick up so tall above the cannon. Now this is a prefab based cannon, so it's gonna be able to have to basically pitch into any angle. We don't need to use the elevation barrel at all for this. We should have a couple of motor driven barrels, so that we can have some movement speed, which is reasonable. And then we should have a good amount of regular barrels so that we can have better accuracy. And you can see already with us not sticking up too much, we have a pretty reasonable accuracy, since indeed the barrel is actually a bit taller than you would first imagine, since it starts from below here. To add some type of resilience to the cannon itself, making the barrel a little bit armored, it can of course be a good idea to make sure that some of these barrels are the heavy barrel. But remember, when you add the heavy barrel type, make sure that the barrel rotation speed remains reasonable, otherwise you'll have issues. And 0.32 is pretty reasonable, we don't have to make it stick up more than this. And to not hard the rotation speed but still provide some boosted accuracy, we can add a couple of normal barrels on top like this. Now we're gonna set up the CRAM firing piece. And in here you should see required accuracy before fire. We can take that to 0.3, which is our, inaccuracy. Then we can go down to CRAM settings, and here everything is as it should, except this one, only low. You should change this to only high. We're gonna use some breadboard to control our CRAM firing piece velocity. So, to make sure we only control the right one, hold Shift and click N, as in new videos every week. You will just rename this to Mortar, and we're gonna use this tag in the breadboard later, so that it only affects the mortars and not the regular CRAM cannons. Right, now you also need a local weapon controller. We're gonna use the all-in-one local weapon controller to control it. So we're gonna smash this down here. We wanna make sure it's EMP insulated from all sides, so that I'm gonna add a rubber block on each direction. This one will control this weapon, and of course it can be a good idea to set a limitation, like for example, things that are underwater, perhaps we shouldn't target, so we can set this to basically only target things on the water surface. It's also pretty hard to hit airships with it, so but large airships you can still hit perfectly fine. It can be a good idea to engage vehicles in this block count range. Basically, like if it's less than 1000 blocks, it's probably not worth it to fire this gun at it. It will be very difficult to hit things that are not slow and evasive with a CRAM mortar, so it's better to not make it shoot at things. Yeah, you probably get it. Right, fail-safes can sometimes just not make your CRAM mortar fire sometimes, and as long as you make sure you don't have any really stupid placement of stuff, the likelihood that it will accidentally shoot your own stuff is very low, so usually turn off the failsafe for CRAM mortars. Now it's time to armor up this thing. You don't want your local weapon controller here to be killed, so having some heavy armor around this thing is a pretty good idea, and it's already EMP insulated and stuff, so that is fine. And within this armor here actually leaves some space for some pretty important blocks. So inside of here we're going to go to the CRAM section, and we're going to have a fusing box. You will want to have one fusing box there. And you may also want to have a laser targeter, so we can fit it here, but more about that later. Let's remove it for now. We can add it back later when I'm going to show you the different options you have. As for the rest of the CRAM mortar armor, we are basically going to trust that the ship's hull will protect the cannon's sides. So we're only going to provide some armor from the top, which is the place where the ship basically can't protect us. So we're gonna have a simple layer of beam slope heavy armor, and I'm gonna top this off with a layer of metal, and that will be some pretty compact and okay armor, which I think will suffice for the task of protecting it. Now we basically have a working CRAM mortar, but of course there is now some breadboard to set up. So to make this fire at an adequate shell speed, we need to use breadboard. The one thing we could do to make it be able to fire at things anyways is basically limiting the firing speed to usually 145 to 180 is good as a general thing, but that will of course make it not be able to shoot at things at long range, so you really want to use a breadboard for this. So bring out your breadboard, I'm just gonna give you a little remote breadboard here. We already have an AI computer and everything like that set up, so I'm just gonna add an AI breadboard. It has to be an AI breadboard. You can't use the like freestanding whatever breadboard. What is it even called? It's called non-AI breadboard. So first off, you will need to have the information about your enemy. Primary target information is what you want, which you will find here, primary target info. Then we are going to have a generic block setter, so we need to control the velocity of our gun, right? The CRAM firing piece is simply called the firing piece. So here we have cannon firing piece, this is it. Inside of here, we need to select the maximum muzzle velocity. Beautiful. To only control the mortars, we're going to name the filter and write in mortar. It is case sensitive and it has to be spelled exactly the same way as you spelled it in the cannon for it to find it. And it did find it. You can see we have a #1. It means it controls one cannon barrel right now. To be able to plot a reasonable ballistic curve, we need some type of function. The first function I found is square root a times 5, and that basically gives a little bit too steep, so the muzzle velocity tends to be a little bit too high. So our ballistics curve is a little bit too high. And when I searched around online to find different functions, I found the 10 plus square root of 9.94 times a. And that gave me some ideas of having uneven numbers to have a good curve. So then I did a lot of plotting and found out that square root 12.81 times a is the optimal curve, and I tested each of them against each other and found out that this thing destroyed the most amount of materials in my test, so I'm gonna keep with this one. Now, you can copy paste this code in the description of this video. Right, so here you have the math evaluator down under new component inventory. This is one of the most used breadboard blocks. And inside of the math evaluator, you will basically write in this sqrt parenthesis 12.81 times a and parenthesis. And this is basically what we need here. So we're gonna have the target distance and have that as an input. And this will modulate the target distance and output another velocity. Now you can see that the velocity is 0, and if you accidentally fire your cannon right now, it will kind of cause the game to lag a little bit. So we're actually going to do a modification of this. We're gonna write in some things that sound complex, but they really aren't. But it's basically if parenthesis a, comma. So basically, if a, so if we have an input here from a, we will do this function here, and then we're gonna have a comma after that, because that basically means like if not, we can put in a random number and end parenthesis. So if we have a input a, we will do this calculation, and if there is not, we will just output 10. So if you accidentally fire your cannon right now, you will just fire it with 10 meters, per second, so you don't cause lag. It's just some weird shenanigans like that. And now we should basically have a setup and complete gun. Before we change the loadout of this gun, we're going to see that it works in its current condition. So we're gonna spawn a marauder up there, and we can actually spawn a marauder a little bit closer as well. And we can just basically check how the gun is working. So right now we have a shell speed, right, it seems to be working there. We can look here, torch universal, good, and it outputs a reasonable speed. Very nice. So it seems to be working absolutely fine. Now we basically need to make sure that our shell is an effective shell. And I'm going to show you the simplest way to set this up first. So basically, when we're having CRAM mortars, we are going to have area of effect weapons. We cannot assume it will hit exactly dead on. So our only real alternatives for dealing damage is fragmentation and explosive. The shell health of 300,000 health is a little bit too high as well, because of course right now we only have hardener pellets. If you want to have a mortar that basically teases the enemy sieve system and is possible to destroy, well, then you can have it like this, but you should at least make sure that the fuse provides a hollow point shell, because then if it hits, it will actually deal damage and just not go straight through the enemy, which it will do right now if it hits. Both fragmentation and explosive is good for this task, but fragmentation is a little bit better if we kind of don't really hit very close, and also fragmentation is generally better against larger targets, and this is a pretty large gun, so we will be mainly shooting at large targets. That is why we are going to switch out hardener pellets with 6 connectors to fragmentation pellets. And that is because fragmentation pellets are a little bit more expensive than hardener pellets, so we're going to use the ones with 6 connections to swap them out, and not the one with less connections that we also do have on this level. Now, there is a thing you can go in here and use the reconfigure layout tab, so you can automatically switch hardener to frag. However, that sometimes messes up the gun, especially when you have multiple barrels, and it doesn't matter how many times they promise me that it's improved, it still messes up my gun sometimes, so I'm switching this out manually. Oh, and here I found some unconnected blocks. Look at that, I did a bad job before, and this is what you have to do if you do a bad job like I did. Then you'll have to fix it afterwards, and it's much easier if it's just working from the start. Alright, they are now removed or connected up. That's what happens when you don't follow your own advice. So anyways, we're going to continue getting some fragmentation in here. We want to have some explosive as well, but we are going to focus on frag. And it's good to make sure that you keep track of your shell health. You don't want the shell health go below 100,000, because then it's probably gonna be shot down by half-assed CWs anyways. High explosive damage deals pretty good damage at the smaller space, so it's probably a good idea to have some explosive as well. So now that we added a good bit of frag, we're also going to add a bit of explosive pellets into the mix. Alright, now we filled so many spaces with fragmentation and high explosive, and you can see here that our shell health is 176,000, which is enough. We have an impact damage, that doesn't matter. We have explosive damage of 70,000, and we have fragmentation 55 of those with 100,000 damage each, which is pretty nice. We're going to increase that a little bit, however, by just taking the fragmentation cone ankle and drag it up to 180 degrees, because that is going to be much more relevant in our situation. So then you can see 166,000 damage per fragment, still 55 of them. Very nice. This cannon is just now very much more powerful. To make it work, however, we need to make sure we hit enemies for near misses. And the simplest and most reliable way to set this up is to set it at low altitude. And we're gonna set it to -5 meters. This means it will explode 5 meters below sea level. Very nice. I also went ahead and filled in the empty spaces with some material containers and a few, well, 2 of them, surge protectors to protect against EMP. Spreading out resources is good for redundancy, and some surge protectors here and there where they absolutely do no harm is a good idea too. For redundancy, my favorite word in From the Depth. So let's just spawn a couple of marauders and see how it goes. The cannon will output a reasonable shell speed, and it will try and fire this shell towards the enemies. So we're just gonna let it go up and go down, and we see where it lands. And as you probably know, the advantage of having mortar crams is that they are slightly self-guiding in the air, why the hit rate is still pretty reasonable. And there you can see it explodes near the marauder. That was kind of a miss, but the marauder is pretty small. Next shell coming in, and you can see it still is kind of a miss, but of course the fragments went through the entire marauder. Very nice. Against the Marauder in particular, having pure explosive would probably be better. But, of course, these fragments, they still have explosive and would deal some pretty reasonable damage. I also think there is a pretty interesting terror factor on mortars. The really cool thing with mortars as well is that they are pretty hard to protect against. Most ships are not very armored from above, they are mostly armored from the side. So by firing from above like this, we're basically avoiding most of their armor, and we can go ahead and right-kill turrets and systems from above instead, basically bypassing the armor belt. Then we have the unreliable way of setting up this fusing box. We can set it, instead of low altitude, we can set it to time from launch, and then add a laser targeter. And that will basically make it explode approximately at the enemy. Since this is a mortar, it will be a little bit less accurate, but in any case, that can work better if you're facing mostly airships and stuff like that. We can see how it deals with a crossbone first. And we can see a shell raining down there, and here you can see it exploded a little bit in the air. It is a more reliable way to deal damage against airships, but time from launch is, well, I know I use it on the Gimli Mark III, but in general it's not the best fuse for CRAM cannons. You can set up basically explode at low altitude with a laser targeted, or high altitude too if you prefer that. How would you make that work in a good way? Well, whatever. You can set that up with a laser targeter as well, but in my experience, it usually messes things up more than it improves things. So I would say just make it explode around the water surface or a little bit below water is usually the way to go. Bam! Here you can see the pretty good damage we can deal against something like the crossbone with a system like this. And a little extra tip too, when you save this down as a prefab, which you of course should, it should be a good idea to make sure the CRAM connections on the sides, which will be able to connect to other cannons. So if you, for example, would spawn this next to another CRAM, you don't want them connecting up. In order to not make them connecting up, you'll need to make sure that the 6-way connectors are switched out to 5-way connectors, where the 5th way is basically turned flat outside so it doesn't connect up to other things. But still it remains all the connections within the cannon. And not only that, when you have done this, and of course don't forget the corners. So here you, for example, will need to have a 2-way connector to make this corner clean. So that's basically what you have to do. And when you've done that, you also need to make sure you find all of the gauge increasers, because the gauge increasers can connect too. So you need to go and find a gauge increaser that doesn't connect to the outside, like this 3-way connector, for example. It will not connect to the outside like this, so it will be safe to have here. Yeah, and that's what you have to do if you want to be able to place these down in series in a long row. So yeah, and that's basically all I have to say about CRAM mortars with breadboard. I hope it helps a lot, and if it does help you, well then you should definitely subscribe to the channel for more tutorials. Big thanks to all of the supporters to this channel in the Ecclesiarchy, the commissioned officers in the army of Gmodism, and the government officials. Your monthly support really helps me a lot. In any case, this is your host Eric, and I am signing out. Check out the Gmodist channel as well for more from the depth content. Click on it in bronze right now. See you next time.